AudiobookHubs that Provoke. This book is trying to air some of my views, perhaps uncommon and controversial, about a few issues that we constantly grapple with. All my observations may not be fully and unquestionably right, nor will they be a farce, and completely devoid of merit. Written by Roy T. James. Part 6. Chapter 26. How to Confront Life. Is there a limit to knowledge? Can we learn everything about everything? What is the reigning thought? We know many things. We also hold a few things as beyond the mind, thus beyond understanding. Mind, on its part, is conceived as an entity having limitations, posing another hurdle. All infinite and never-ending things are considered to be beyond the mind, and we attribute to everything something infinite and never-ending. In short, it is far easier to be without any idea of something than to be aware of it. The difficulty in comprehending things is accepted as something associated with life. In all probability, this could be the truth. The idea of space is everywhere, both inside and outside of everything. The presence thus has to be acknowledged of an infinite number of universes inside every atom in the universe. If a piece of a material is cut it in half and cut the half in half and so on, it can go on. In this case, one will never run out of something to cut. When you burn something, you are just turning the material into heat, light, ash, and smoke, etc. Also, nothing is lost in this reaction. Even the electric power that runs TV or computer is not lost. One can look at electric power as water flowing through the cord into the screen. This then sprays out into the room and back into the environment again. Nothing can be considered as lost. All that takes place is just a change in form. Everything moves in a circle or cycle, back and forth. This, in a nutshell, can be considered as our present idea about material things. In a similar manner, whether we use the process of elimination, extrapolation, or any other method of reasoning, it has been acknowledged that one can learn about life. I think we are going on a tangent. That too motivated by our predilection with another dimension of life, the spiritual world. Think of a group of frogs residing in a well, and another group living outside. The cosmology of those inside may contain ideas of the universe, as well as a certain variety of species, both limited in its extent. For example, they will be having strong notions of cosmic background noise, as they will be hearing a lot of noise during their lifetime without actually seeing where the sound comes from. If the owner of the well follows a pattern of cleaning the well on a yearly basis, as most villagers do, those frogs may also possess certain ancestral knowledge about the end of the universe. Assuming that some frog, in the past, happened to escape back into the well and witness the cleaning process. Now think of the other group. These frogs will be having a totally different cosmology with better grasp about things and will be free of illusions like cosmic background noise. Questions like the end of the universe may not occur at all to them, having never experienced a discontinuity. How does this story fit in for humans? On all matters except those concerning life, we are like the latter group, assuming that reality exists, whether we perceive it or not, and there is no logical necessity for an end, whichever facet of the universe is under consideration. But when it comes to life, I think we are severely handicapped. Like the earlier group of frogs, our idea of life is only what we experience from inside life. Unless we are able to view life from a plane different from life, all the notions we entertain about life cannot describe life in full. Nobody can say I understand what a globe is unless one has a look at it, that too, from the outside of it. Here, our fondness for the spiritual dimension of life is effectively putting a brake in our quest for new ideas. Chapter 27. Global warming. Is the fear rational? Since 18th century we know prehistoric climates were different from the modern period. A theory of what can term ice age when glaciers covered Europe and much of North America came in vogue, and it was scientifically accepted that the Earth had been subject to a past ice age. The Earth's climate has changed dramatically in the past, apparently in response to natural changes in orbital characteristics and topography. Plate tectonics, warmer than at present for most of this time, punctuated by infrequent ice ages. These may have been caused by processes associated with continental drift and greenhouse warming, a result of carbon dioxide production from natural causes like volcanic activity. Now that the prospect of another ice age is staring at us, all nations are in a huddle to devise ways to defeat the change and save our planet. And scary stories of warming climate fill the atmosphere. But there is also another side to this. The people, I think, are generally in the dark about the fact that there are opposing views on the gravity of the problem, especially among scientists. There are many among them who believe that global warming is benign and natural. Isn't our fear irrational? Is the extensive preparations, international conferences, agreements and plans adopted by almost all nations to prepare for an imminent warming, in many cases under pressure, really warranted? Should we arm ourselves so comprehensively for natural variation of our living environment, that too at the cost of many of our conveniences? Imagine that something like this did happen sometime towards the end of Ice Age. Assume it was a well-populated world, all inhabitants possessing abundantly the essential abilities and qualities needed for survival. A small group of enlightened ones joins together. They foresee an imminent change in weather. Putting all their might into use, they manage to assemble a good chunk of concerned citizens to devise, practice and popularize ways to defeat global melting. They search and locate regions of the planet least influenced by the rising temperature and shift their abodes, and quite a few frightened citizens follow suit. Time goes by. Climate slowly started turning warm, and extensive studies were in progress, issuing regular warnings about this phenomenon. Accordingly, the above-mentioned group of concerned citizens had already taken shelter in and around the areas more conducive for escaping from a warm climate, like ice-clad peaks. Most of the others perished, their end coming a little earlier than normal owing to the complexities of weather-induced problems. For those who were in the shelter, the next and subsequent generations had to relocate themselves deeper and deeper into the colder regions of the planet to find comfort amidst the changing climate. Naturally, survival has been always at stake for those species as the climate change continued to threaten their habitat. For the others, though they exited rather early, new generations evolved with greater tolerance to warm climate. Life continued. Millenniums went by. The ones who took shelter among the ice-covered peaks, and their progeny, continued their life in a rather comfortable manner, thanks to the known surroundings. They evolved into beings who are at ease with such an environment, like polar bears, penguins, or Eskimos, whereas those who continued living in other parts of the planet had a horrendous time, the large-scale death and destruction that was always there, making some of them take shelter with the other group. But many of those who survived have evolved into a rich collection of species populate the planet today, each of them suited most appropriate for a certain instance of the climate, while the transition from Ice Age to the present was in progress. As these species were better suited to the new climate, their numbers swelled, and they started occupying newer pastures and regions to become, finally, the conquerors of the planet. One such species, perhaps the most successful of all, came to don the mantle of the queen of all kinds of life, genus Homo. Now we are again nearing the end of an age. Should we choose to shelter and save us from the agony of climate change by living under self-imposed restrictions and pressing inconveniences, and let our progeny continue in this world as unsuitable species for their era? Or should we let ourselves go, tacitly agreeing to live at the mercy of whatever weather the coming days might be of, and give an opportunity to our future generations to turn into, say, genus Homo++ and continue their life, ruling the world as we do now? I have read, the worst critic of an artist is the artist himself, and I think we are behaving like artists. Maybe we think of the human brain as an unnecessary appendage to our physiology. We find it quite pleasurable to criticize whatever we do, invariably terming it as unnatural. And we find it equally entertaining to applaud whatever happens in the world without human intervention, always calling it natural. Our urge to picture it as artificial and harmful, whatever we do, when contrasted by a readiness to paint as natural and harmless, whatever is caused by other forms of life, only lends support to such a view. Chapter 28: What is behind sexism? I came across the following as the most common examples of sexism. All these examples struck me as fallacies, and each one of these could be cited in illustrating man's misplaced judgment. For, though the observed nature, like being assertive, showing competence, etc., may be dispersed in a similar manner among men as well as women. The underlying reason showing such a nature will be very different. Man chooses to be so, to satisfy some of his desires, say, of dominating, or of proving one's caliber, whereas, for the woman, the adopted nature is only for meeting the ends. Women generally do not have any unfulfilled desires of control and oppression. Also, if and when she has any of submission, people, mostly men, are there always on her call. If women are assertive, it can be seen as aggressive. Women have to walk a thin line between being too nice and too forceful. The substantial difference between man and woman is that it is easy to please a man, whereas it is not so, as far as a woman is concerned. For, man will always find a need for whatever is offered, but it is impossible to make a woman's day except by meeting the real need. And it is easy to see that man's assertive nature is easily containable, mostly, by feeding his ego, and such things need not take place only in totally related areas. In the case of a woman, the assertive nature being closely linked with the real issue at hand, there is hardly any room for shortcuts, like in the case of man. The woman, therefore, devotes her attention almost totally to the issue at hand. And man is not at all used to such single-minded concentration. As man cannot comprehend devoting fully, confronting or attending to, only to one issue at a time, he finds this is another example of the aggressive nature of women. When women are successful, they're often called bitchy and seen as less likable. As we saw above, women, unfortunately, do not sport such unnecessary niceties as men. This generally makes them unpopular with the male crowd, as well as inviting unpleasant epithets if they happen to become successful. Not that women are too nice when not promoted, they are only more popular when they are shouldering lesser responsibility, as in that case, the lesser may be the occasions demanding nicety, and in this case, the woman's unsophisticated nature goes unnoticed. Women are more likely to get lower initial offers, could be true. In the case of women, pay is not the main concern, as, unlike men, they are not looking for a plum offer. As employers might be already aware, they are not looking for a reason for a change in the present job, which men generally are. Women are less likely to get credit for group projects. It may be a combination of men being assumed more competent than they actually are and women not actively taking credit for their work. True, for a man, credit is required at frequent intervals to keep his morale at an acceptably high level, and he will go out of his way and gets noticed easily. But woman generally keeps to her part of ship, even if that keeps her away from the limelight, and women tend to form fairly long-time relationship with one's work, making showering of credits unnecessary. Women are assumed to be incompetent until they prove themselves. This, in fact, is true for both men and women. They are assumed to be good for nothing unless they prove otherwise. But, in the case of man, the first thing he does will be to show his prowess, how beneficial his presence, how costly his absence, and as a result, how irreplaceable he is. And a woman does not take any such efforts to show one's value. Women get promoted on performance, and men get promoted on potential. No, not at all. Both get promoted on performance, but the nature of performance differs. In man's case, after quickly completing the assigned task, one devotes his time and energy to glorify what one has just completed, or to diminish others, by pontificating on questions like how much of improvements are possible. In the woman's case, performance strictly is limited to the task which has been assigned. Thus, in women's case the work gets assessed lower than what one does, while in the case of man, as it includes the time spent on other things, the assessed value is generally more than the actual effort one puts in. Talkative men are seen as competent, and talkative women as incompetent. Look at any man who is talkative. More often than not, the topic of one's speech will be about past accomplishments, and how, if time and place permitting, one can produce such wonders again, or how worthy one's efforts are, and other areas that are mostly abstract. When it comes to women, not only that they generally avoid the imaginary, but also discuss the merits of all things wise and wonderful which few of the gentlemen around can afford. As the discussion is not to our liking, we label those who initiated that as unworthy. When women show anger, they are often judged as too emotional. In fact, except in one's personal affairs, There is no place for emotional expressions other than for the purpose of supporting one's aims, efforts, or desire. Hence such expressions of anger, etc., might lead to unexpected results if the underlying intent is not conveyed clearly. Some people forget this while showing emotions and get themselves marked temperamental. No one is to play with emotions without realizing this. Women are often interrupted or ignored in meetings. That the main purpose of a meeting or conference is to create an atmosphere conducive to the solution of her problems rather than the solution itself, is well known. As mentioned earlier, women being too professionally focused on their outlook might miss this point, and as a result, their constant devotion to certain particularities may seem to get overlooked. Therefore, what gets overlooked is not the person, but the solution behind the person, as it takes away another opportunity for creating an environment conducive to further interaction. Women are judged more harshly on their appearance. Mostly for a gentleman, it might be okay if someone questions his dress, but it certainly is anathema if someone questions his caliber. And for a lady, it is okay to cast aspersions on her caliber while finding a spot on her dress is unthinkable. Hence we judge women by their appearance. Other things are okay with them. And ridicule the professional behind every man. He doesn't care for other things. And ridicule is invisible, but the appearance is widely seen. As we saw above, all of these examples are easily explainable as the particularities of human behavior, based on the existing theories of human transactions, and have no element of sexual influence in it. Why do we then consider these, incorrectly, as examples of female suppression and institute various ways and means for castigating males? And the males tolerate this happily. Isn't this the price males pay for remaining superior? Yes, I also think it is another method to keep the real women away from competing with the man to let him continue to remain superior. Chapter 29 Organize or Perish. Is that the choice? Are we well organized? Organizational structures developed from the ancient times of hunters and collectors in tribal organizations through highly royal and clerical power structures to industrial structures in today's post-industrial establishments. Our society too is organized in a similar manner. This structure provides the foundation on which standard operating procedures and routines rest. It also determines which individuals get to participate in which decision-making processes, and thus to what extent different individuals' views shape the organization's actions. The authority the organization wields can be of a charismatic authority, character, heroism, leadership, religious, b. traditional authority, patriarchs, patrimonialism, feudalism, and c. legal authority, modern law and state, bureaucracy. Nowadays, with the advent of instant worldwide communication, essential free information, and the ability of large numbers of people to organize and collaborate without hierarchy, creativity as well as innovation is moving far more rapidly than it can through a traditional organization. One common character of all these arrangements is that there exists a common thread controlling these in their practical domain. Functional control takes place in two different scenarios, in the following manner, irrespective of the styles, authority or other nuances of the organization. Scenario A. Highly qualified and learned people are selected to formulate policies and strategies for the organization, or for the society. Such people head the organization, and those who are relatively weak, especially in the intellectual domain, are given the task to implement the policies and strategies. Scenario B. People are selected at random, looking only at their affinity for the job, and are asked to formulate policies and strategies, and those who are highly qualified and learned are chosen to implement these. Now let us see what really happens in each case. In scenario A, undoubtedly, the best policies shall get instituted. But when these are transferred to the people responsible for implementation of the same, things wouldn't be going well. A lack of skill or an absence of talent would be visible in dovetailing the different requirements, like environmental, social, economic or political considerations, while the plans are being followed through. Those responsible for this invariably sees this as a result of insufficient attention to planning, primarily because they lack the intellectual wealth necessary for a dispassionate assessment. In democracies, this gets compounded further. Those who made the plan and those who found this lacuna would have been from different political dispensations, and a rivalry between them feed the desire of one-upmanship. Ultimately, though it is based on a well-thought-out policy, the people suffer. Whereas in scenario B, the policies that get instituted may not be the best. But when these are transferred to the people, who are responsible for putting these policies to practice, things would get corrected in its execution. As, in this scenario, the people responsible for dovetailing the array of requirements, like environmental, social, economic or political considerations, to belong to the better lot. Hence, in this case, things shall get smoothed out, while the plans are being followed through. Those having overall responsibility for this can find that both the planning and the execution have been given sufficient attention. Ultimately, though it is based on a plan for implementation that may not be the best, people stand to benefit the most. What is there to learn from this? That we need to review the present organization of our organizations. Specifically, the way we allocate our talents to different levels of jobs. Presently, those who are better qualified and experienced look after higher level tasks like planning, while those who are directly dealing with the jobs involved in the execution of plans are the less qualified ones. As we saw above in the case of scenario A, this leaves us with much of unfinished tasks. That leads to washing dirty linen in public, due insufficient attention at various stages of execution. We are closing our eyes to this, calling it part of human nature, and harp on the need to have better ethical outlook, pointing to the need for a spiritual dimension to life. Suppose humans organized their organizations as we saw above in scenario B naturally, those performing jobs of executing the tasks being people of high caliber, we can expect a full, 100% completion of jobs. For the same reason, these people can also be expected to overcome shortfalls in all other activities. Thus, if planning is found to be inadequate to meet the ends, which is possible with this kind of talent distribution, the style of completing the work shall get appropriately altered. The inadequacy of our organization should have been clear to us by now, having seen wars and calamities on a regular scale. Not only that, the superiority of the latter scenario should have been clear and obvious, having experimented with such issues quite often. However, we neither thought of organizing our society to fit into such a picture, nor did we realize the very existence of such variants. Humans have shown great interest in journeying to the extremes of whatever they do, and discover new vistas of knowledge if nothing else. But they haven't moved even one bit away from the first, age-old approach, as far as these issues are concerned. We still continue with the same arrangement in our society, routinely adding new elements of structural and functional change, to account for the stream of failures encountered. Why didn't we choose the better way, to organize ourselves? Can there be a reason, other than that we want to constantly derive the pleasure of reorganizing ourselves? Chapter 30. Why are we behind alcohol? Our approach to alcohol. Alcohol and its effects have always been a dear topic in our society. Strategies focusing on the supply of alcohol beverages, regulation of drinking premises, policies that shape drinking practices, and practices aimed at regulating the hazardous environment of drinking are some of the reactions of the society aimed at controlling this behavior. These reactions have been either concentrating on the drinkers, with focus on health effects, social degradation or appearance of public sobriety, or on alcohol, with focus on availability of alcohol in rationing, taking the profit out of selling alcohol or other approaches to controlling its production. Functionally, or attack on the ill effects of alcohol consumption can be thought of as belonging to any of the following. A. The colonial view. That it is only a pleasant custom. Overindulgence shows the weakness of character. B. The temperance view. That it is alcohol, which controls the drinker. Hence, rather than attacking your brothers, a restriction in its sale should be the tactic. C. The alcoholism view. That this is a disease. Hence, what is needed is neither contempt nor tactic, but sympathetic treatment. D. The epigenetic view. That this is influenced by one's genetic makeup. Possible methods of alteration need be studied. I think it is evident. The colonial view is a natural one. It is quite similar to how we think about all other issues. Someone follows the incorrect diet, sports, unhealthy sleeping habits, or other sports, behavioral quirks that are dangerous to one's health, we do not immediately jump to, say, environmental or other abstract causes. We take the most probable cause, which, in this case being careless, and issue appropriate strictures. But when it came to alcohol, we changed our viewpoint and we moved from the natural cause. Why? I remember an incident from my student days. We were strolling down the country road to his home and he, one of my classmates, had to face a serious scolding from his neighbour. He stopped, changed his direction, took us to a nearby toddy shop, had a bit of the local brew, and then took us all back to the neighbour with whom he had the altercation. He replied with choicest expletives, threatened those people with very serious consequences to follow if they don't apologise immediately, and left that place only after getting all that he asked for. Back at home, when I asked whether the detour for toddy was essential, my friend's reply was, "The ambience of a drunken personality radically alters the effect of whatever I am going to say, making it many folds." I think that is the reason. Those at the receiving end will feel things with greater impact if coming from a drunken source. Those doing wrongs will get a lesser blame if they are in a drunken state. Those at the other end can also be greatly relieved. They won't have to assess their kin, neighbours or good friends as bad people. For being drunk is a well-tolerated excuse. It permits one to engage in bad deeds without the risk of losing one's character. And these add to what is giving the drinkers the drive to drink. But it is a fact that people behave awfully low when they are drunk. Unimaginable cruelties, merciless and harsh brutalities and other deeds of unbelievable inhumanity are associated with the drunken. What can we do? Direct our ire against the next obvious culprit, alcohol, and free our near and dear from all blame. Many new, different approaches to this topic are, I think, a necessity to keep the discussion alive, away from the initial view. Chapter 31. Why gun for the natural? Is our penchant for the natural? Man, by nature, is always on the lookout for something beyond. If so, what is behind our predilection for the natural? Nowadays, especially, there is so much value attached to the word. Things like all-natural whole-grain goodness, or non-toxic all-natural household cleaning kits, are the common marketing jargons of today, amply proving this. But it was not so some time back. Things like fortified grain, vitalized oil, were those in great demand. Now we are discarding the fortified, or vitalized stuff, giving it a rather repulsive term, artificial, and choosing the rather feeble ones in lieu, naming them, of course, with a rather agreeable word, organic. Why? I think we, the people, make societies. Therefore, societies behave like people. Our behaviour and priorities in life are not the same in our childhood, youth, or old age. In a similar manner, societies, and nations which are constituted by the societies, also have their priorities changing over time. Thus, when the world was in its childhood, which, let us say, is the period before the Industrial Revolution, we witnessed a rather low demographic, cultural and economic status. The period thereafter shows a burgeoning society that is making fast and steady leaps forward. We were at home with great changes, explorations, and successes. Now I think the world is entering its old age. The signs that we see everywhere of decadence and an agitated and unstable state of societies, I think, is an indication that the social setup is an unsuitable one. We can confirm this just by looking around. See any nation of the world. Everywhere, it can be seen that more irrational happenings are taking place. Our penchant for the natural is just another example of the irrational. Chapter 32. Always cooperate. Is cooperation all that good? If it isn't, what are the perils of cooperation? To examine this further, let us study activities of comparable nature. In fact, such activities, cooperation, coordination, and collaboration are some of the most hyped words of today. Collaboration indicates entities working together for something new and to find a shared vision. Coordination indicates monitored sharing, planned teamwork, and mutual support. Cooperation indicates entities supporting each other. I agree, there is a certain amount of overlap in meanings conveyed by these words in actual use. In fact, What I mean here by cooperation is what we get when we subtract what is shown here against the other two words from what is shown here against that word. Ultimately, that is only the meaning that is popularly understood. To make my point clear, let us consider one example from our history that is often trumpeted as the victory of cooperation. Egyptian pyramid is a living example. Suppose the people who labored to build this structure were not at all cooperating. Suppose those desirous of seeing this monument were quite determined, powerful, and did not dilute their demands. The only possibility of having the structure erected, in that case, is to have recourse to extra human assistance. That would have driven the people to the extremes of their efforts in devising new and different ways to move those slabs of stone, particularly without involving human effort. What could have been the result? We would have been having heavy earth-moving machinery at the time of the pyramids. Naturally, that would have put us way ahead in technology. Certainly, this entails us to have had many of the products of industrial revolution already in place. Of course, that would have advanced the modern world by a few millennia, and undoubtedly, we today would have been ahead by those many centuries. What does this show? Cooperation is not all that desirable, especially in its abstract sense. Chapter 33 How Essential Are Minorities? The minorities and their significance. Take a metallic piece. In its virgin form, it won't be of much use. The absence of certain properties of interest, as well as the presence of a few unnecessary ones, severely limits its usability. The properties of interest need to be added to it by various processes and addition of certain elements. Also, the material needs to undergo certain operations and procedures to remove the properties that are not necessary, depending on our need. To get the properties suitable to us, we need to alter the composition of the material, maybe involving the addition of many other elements. The end is that the original material is embedded with a host of other materials in various quantities and shapes. In fact, we can easily say, it is the presence of the minority elements that gives the material the necessary qualities and makes it suitable to our need. Moreover, another property of even greater significance, the ability to counter deterioration, also is provided by none other than these additional elements. The above example clearly shows that the minority is a matter of great significance, in the absence of which a. the material is of no use, and b. the material has no life. Can this be a universal law? What if we apply it in the above manner to human society as well? Can we compare human society and the world in general with the behavior of material things? Especially in view of many of the findings in the branch of science that deals with matter at the subatomic scale, namely, quantum theory, I think it is worth an effort. In this case, let us compare the working of a society with the material, say, a piece of metal. In such a case, we can consider the constituents of this metal as the atoms of the main elements that make the metal piece and other atoms, some of which that are added with purpose, and some others, merely are impurities. When we compare our society to a piece of metal, the constituents of the metal piece, atoms of different elements, take the position of people. And we need to compare people's behavior to the behavior of atoms in a metal. As clear from the above discussion on materials, we can say that the overall quality and usability of the piece of metal is dependent on the constituent atoms of different materials in that metal, which include the atoms of added elements. Similarly, when we consider society, people of differing capacity, orientation, outlook, faith, etc. do play their part in the general nature and reputation of the society. We can take a society to be a monolith, constituted by many groups, each consisting of people having a similar outlook. Each such group is capable of making some addition or alteration to the overall standing of the society. People who differ from the majority could, therefore, be thought of as necessary additive atoms that change the property of the material and bring it to the desired standard, thereby making it fit for its intended use. In short, the overall character of the society is that of the people who form the majority, but the defining strength of a society is in its reputation, how others look up to it. This is exemplified by such epithets as receptive, progressive, violent, peaceful, loving, etc. One or more of such properties do get applied to it as a result of the interactions among various minority groups and that within the whole populace. The majority thus gives society the structure and the minority gives the reputation. We can easily see certain additives succeeded in making iron, which would have deteriorated fully over time, into steel that can withstand the ravages of time. Similarly, I think it is the minority constituents of a society which is preventing it from natural disintegration. Chapter 34 Humans, the error-prone species. 2 Errors human. Why? How can such a maxim come into use, except perhaps on the realization that errors need to be an integral part of humans? I know, I am questioning one of the fundamental tenets of human society. This particular idea is so ingrained in us that we have devised a flurry of arguments to keep its support alive at all times and under any circumstance. The proliferation of warnings and advisory instructions in and around our living spaces, notwithstanding the multi-layered safety net we have erected in our society, in fact, is already proof. A few of such gems of wisdom are: 1. Making mistakes teach us valuable lessons. 2. Mistakes teach us to be forgiving. 3. Mistakes help us let go of our fears. 4. Making mistakes is essential to living a life without regrets. 5. Mistakes help you grow as a person. 6. Mistakes can be fun. 7. Mistakes lead to success. 8. Mistakes inspire us. 9. Mistakes serve as a warning. 10. Mistakes allow us to see how we are like others. 11. No human is perfect and so everyone makes mistakes. We don't stop here. Our understanding of errors has been enhanced by distinguishing between 2 types of cognitive tasks that may result in errors. The first type of task occurs when people engage in well-known, oft-repeated processes, such as driving to work or making a pot of coffee. Errors may occur while performing these tasks because of interruptions, fatigue, time pressure, anger, distraction, anxiety, fear, or boredom. By contrast, tasks that require problem-solving are done more slowly and sequentially, are perceived as more difficult and require conscious attention. Examples include making a differential diagnosis and readying several types of surgical equipment made by different manufacturers. Errors here are due to misinterpretation of the problem that must be solved and lack of knowledge. Keeping in mind these 2 different kinds of tasks is helpful to understanding the multiple reasons for errors and is the first step in preventing them. We continue. Now we try to distinguish between different environmental conditions that can lead to errors. People make errors for a variety of reasons that have little to do with lack of good intention or knowledge. Humans have many intellectual strengths, e.g., large memory capacity and an ability to react creatively and effectively to the unexpected, and limitations, e.g., difficulty attending carefully to several things at once and generally poor computational ability, especially when tired. There are many opportunities for individuals to prevent error. Some actions involve communicating clearly to other team members, requesting and giving feedback for all verbal orders, and being alert to accidents waiting to happen. Other actions that include simplifying processes and standardizing protocols, developing and participating in multidisciplinary team training, and being receptive to discussions about errors and near misses, are also in vogue. However, large, complex problems require thoughtful, multifaceted responses by individuals, teams, and organizations. That is, preventing errors and improving safety require a systems approach to the design of processes, tasks, training, and conditions of work in order to modify the conditions that contribute to errors. In fact, all aspects of life and living are formulated this way, which requires a commitment to safety, a thorough knowledge of the technical processes of care, an understanding of likely sources of error, and effective ways to reduce errors. And we take pride in this as the rational, human approach, which no other species have. But to me, things don't look so easy. So much preparation is not needed, for any other form of life, to do things in the right way. What is the difference between humans and all other species? How is that we are very comfortable with the argument that no human is perfect, and more importantly, with the corollary, say, all dogs are perfect? Why are we readily accepting the dictum, 2 errors human? There is a big difference between humans and other species. Unlike other forms of life, humans tend to do everything in a style that is away from the natural. Also, when they get used to the style, they may revert to the natural. And, though the mating season lasts throughout the year, there is no visible post-mating agony. Putting two and two together, I think it is rather intuitive to conclude that humans managed to release themselves from post-mating agony because of the efforts they took in cultivating such abstract entities like the style to control everything they do. That is to say, humans happen to reach the happy situation of much style and preparation to occupying all the activities of life fully, and as a result, there is less time or space left for mating and none for post-mating agony. And one dependable facet of every activity, which has the power to keep us engaged, happens to be errors. Errors provide the excuse to keep us occupied, even when everything else relating to the activity we were engaged with, like the style, fails to garner our interest. It will be interesting to think of human life, how tumultuous our society would have been, that too with such a long season for mating, had this not happened. The post-mating agony, perhaps, explains how we happen to have most of our customs, ceremonies, codes, and a host of other intricacies centered around human reproductive organs. In societies that are strict, puritanical or Victorian, all the harsh rules, customs or etiquettes are of this, and, in societies that are modern and progressive, the freedom and the liberated thinking also are about this. Over the last many centuries of living, we have become successful in suppressing the post-mating agony without even leaving a trace. As a remnant of our success, the complex defense systems made by our ancestors still remain here. We now celebrate these as unique elements of human nature, one of the most potent among them being errors.